Hey guys, Pix100 here, and today I'm going to go over some of the basic controls in a Windows Forms application. So, as always, I want to create a new project, and I'm going to create a Windows Forms application .NET framework. So it's my recent projects. If you followed my Hello World Windows Forms application, then it should be in your recent projects too. If not, you can just search Windows Forms and it'll be listed here. So next, and I'm gonna call this basic controls, and I'm gonna put it in my CSharp tutorials repository so I can put it on GitHub later, and then create. Let me actually move my mic to a good spot. Again, the scaling thing doesn't affect you, it's because of my screen. And so the controls that we are going to be going over are label, not background worker, a link label, a button, radio button, checkbox, and just two more actually, a text box and a picture box. And so we're actually going to want two radio buttons and two checkboxes because I'll be explaining that later. So let's start with the button. So a button is, as you can probably tell based on just using different programs and applications, you click on a button and it performs a task. A label is just something that sits there and holds text information. And in programming, text is called a string because it's a string of characters, and a character is a letter or symbol or number or anything that like text. A text box allows you to type and change the text. So since we're going to be using these three together, we're going to put them there. Then we're going to deal with the checkboxes and the radio buttons. So as you can tell from experience, a checkbox allows you to check and uncheck each of those boxes individually, and they don't interfere with each other. A radio button, on the other hand, are grouped based on what their parent container is, and since we don't have any container controls in here, the parent container for everything is this form. It's this window. So if I check the first radio button, then the second radio button is unchecked. If I check the second one, then it unchecks the first one. And then there's a picture box, which, as the name implies, it holds a picture. And then there's a link label, which is like a normal label, except you can click on it, and it's just like a link on a web page. It starts off usually blue and underlined, and you click on it, and it does something, and it turns like a violet color. And you can change what colors it does here. So we're going to have to name all of these because, as you can see, they have names. PictureBox 1, Link Label 1, Radio Button 1 and 2, Button 1. But that's not a good practice to just keep those names, because then you're going to have to remember, well, Button 1 does this, Button 2 does that, Button 3 does this. It's easier if you just name them based on what they do. So we're going to name the text box what should we call it? Because it doesn't really do anything important in this example. Example text box. And I'll call this example label. And example button. In an actual program, these would have better names, but because they're not really doing anything specific, I can't really think of a better name for it. So, if I can spell properly, example radio button. Example radio button 2. Example checkbox. Example checkbox 2. Example PictureBox. And example LinkedLabel. And so now we're going to change the text of these different controls. I'm going to do them in groups now. So button 1, I'm going to set a transfer, and actually I'm going to call this transfer button instead. The text box is not going to have any text in it, and the label is, we're going to change it in debugging, so it doesn't really matter what we say. I'm going to say sample text. So I'm going to actually move this all the way over here and stretch this to be this size, and I'm going to change the anchor of the text box and the label. And what the anchor is, actually, no, I'm not. Let me explain the anchor first. So I'm going to actually move that like here and stretch this and then change the anchor. So the anchor, I'm not sure how to explain this other than it anchors the sides of a control to the relative position and size of the text box, or of the parent container. So with this being set to top, left, and right, this left side is going to stay over to the left, and this right side is going to stay over to the right, and this top side is going to stay over to the top. So what that does, and actually I'm going to change the anchor of the label first before I resize. I'm going to make the label top and right so that the label stays at the top and the right. So now when I resize, the label is moving relative to the right side, and the text box is stretching because the left side is staying relative to the left and the right side is staying relative to the right. And so I'm going to double click on this button to start typing some code. And so the code for the button is going to be example label dot text equals example text box dot text. And so what that does is the text property is what contains what each control says on it. It contains the text for that property. And so what I'm saying is, whenever I click the button, whatever text is in the text box becomes the text on the label. So if I run this, then I can type hello, transfer, and now the label says hello. Rix 100 Infinity Programming. The label matches the text box, and the reason why I left all the space here is because we can type whatever we want in, and the text box is scrolling like that. Transfer, and I wanted to have at least some room. I mean, it's stretching off the screen because I type so much, but you can see more of it just to test it. Okay, so now with the checkboxes and the radio button. So I'm going to double click on the checkbox, so when you double click on a button, it creates a method. A method is like a group of commands. It creates a method or function of button click, which means this gets triggered when the button gets clicked. When you double click on a checkbox, it creates the method of checkbox check change. So that gets triggered whenever you check or uncheck the checkbox. So we are going to say if an if statement is you put in the conditions, and if it matches that conditions, then it does whatever's in this block of code. So if example checkbox dot checked equals true, then example checkbox dot text equals checked, else example checkbox dot text equals unchecked. And so what's this saying is if example checkbox dot checked, which determines if there's a check mark in the box or not, equals, and when doing this statement you need two equal signs, because it's checking if it's equals, it's not assigning it to be equal. True, so true means there's a check mark. Then example checkbox dot text equals checked, and for a string you need to put quotes around it. Else, so if this above is not true, then example checkbox dot text equals unchecked. And so we're going to do the same thing for the second checkbox. I don't know what that whole loading thing was, except we're going to put a 2 after these because it's a different control. We're doing it for the second checkbox. And I noticed earlier that these, because it shifted when it went to debug for me because my screen is scaled, these were overlapping, so I'm moving those out a bit. So now we're going to double click on the radio button, which it has the same checked changed, and we are going to copy that same code, except we're going to change checkbox 2 to radio button. And so we're going to do the same thing for RadioButton 2. And so when we debug, you check that and it says checked, you uncheck it, it says unchecked, checked, unchecked, checked, and see how it switched? Because when clicking this, it undid that, so now you can switch them back and forth and they interact with each other, but the checkboxes don't care the state of the other checkboxes or the state of the radio buttons. And so the last thing we're going to do is with this picture box. So I'm going to put this link label at the bottom and stretch this picture box to be the rest of this size. And I'm going to anchor the picture box to top, left, bottom, and right. And the link label is going to be the bottom left. And so I am going to change the text of the link label to be show picture. Actually, I'm going to do show/hide picture. And so when I double click on that to get a link label .link clicked, I am going to do, actually before I type in this code, I need to add a resource. So if you go into properties, these are the properties for the project. You need to go into resources, and I have an image on my computer already prepared. It will be on the GitHub if you want to use that, or you can just Google any random image or use an image already on your computer. But I'm going to add existing file and go into CSharp tutorials and use this test image that I just quickly Googled. So there you go, it just says test image. I'm gonna save, I'm gonna go back. Okay, so, and you know what, I'm not gonna do the show or hide, I'm just gonna do show because it's simpler and this is a basic tutorial. So picture box, or example picture box dot background image equals resource person involved. This dot basic controls dot properties dot resources dot test image. So background image is something that most controls have, which is the image in the background. And for this, I'm going to change background image layout to zoom, and you'll see why in a moment. So this is setting the background image to the resource, to the property resource that I just assigned to the test image that I had. And so when I start, whenever I click this link, it's now the test image. And something that I'm going to do to demonstrate easier is I'm going to change the back color to, let's just do black. So I had it set to zoom, so that it showed the image, and if I had this set to black when I showed it, it would have black bars on either side because of the size of the image. But you can also change, where is it? Here. You can change it to stretch, which makes it fit the ratio of the control no matter what. It basically, it stretches. You can have it centered, which keeps the image as its normal size, but just centers it on. Or you could do tile, which keeps the image as its normal size, but if it's smaller, it starts in the top left corner, and it keeps putting more of the image to tile onto the control. Or none, which I'm not really sure what it does because I never used none. So I'm going to keep it as zoom, and I'm going to start again. And so, show picture. As you can see, there are these black bars on the side now. And so, that was the tutorial. Checked and unchecked, radio buttons, text properties, TextBox, label, button, and LinkedLabel, and a PictureBox. So, hope you enjoyed. Till next time, check out my Discord for any programming help. Check out my other channels, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all of those. Patreon down in the description. Till next time, bye!